Good afternoon and welcome to the Committee of Adjustment hearings for Suburban Panel 2. We're a City of Ottawa quasi-judicial tribunal that holds public hearings to consider Planning Act applications, including minor variances to the zoning requirements and consent to sever land. Our hearings are now in Ben Franklin Place at 101 Centerpoint Drive. We also enable remote participation by video conferencing for our registered speakers. We are live streaming on YouTube, and the video will be archived and available for future viewing by the public. My name is Fabien Poulin. I'll be chairing today's hearings, and you can address me by my name or as chair. And with me are my fellow panel members, George Barrett, Heather McLean, and Julianne Wright. The procedure for the hearings will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on screen from time to time are the applications we'll hear today. For the sake of efficiency, I may deal with agenda items in a different order. Panel members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or in opposition to each of the applications. Today, we'll hear any oral submissions relating to the applications. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property in question before the hearing. They also had to confirm in writing that they did so, or they'll need to swear or affirm an oath today that they've fulfilled the sign posting requirements. Otherwise, we may have to adjourn or postpone the hearing. The panel may ask for a brief presentation of an application followed by questions for the applicant and city planning staff. We will then hear from members of the public who have registered to speak, and we may also have questions for them. And finally, the applicant, who has the burden of proof, will have the opportunity to make the final comments and reply. Please address your comments to me as the chair, starting with your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. All presentations are limited to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at my discretion. At the end of the hearing, the panel may either make an oral decision or we may reserve our decision, which means it won't be delivered today. In either case, and within 10 days, the Committee of Adjustment will send the official written decision and reasons for it to all parties, participants, and anyone else who has requested a copy. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure we'll be following today? No questions, thank you. Oh, didn't see you. Please come up to the table and just use the microphone at the front.
Hi, good afternoon.
What's your name?
Denise Downing, and I'm here about the I think it's 81 Burland Street, that they don't have enough parking spaces. I'm here just to make a few comments, but to start with, I wanted to mention that I never received anything at my address. It's supposed to be within, I think, 60 meters, nor did my mother.
Okay.
So I only
we can
just
address
found
that.
out.
We can address that when we get to the
Okay,
to
I
the
just wanted to
application.
let you know that's why I didn't write in, or that's so I don't have 5 minutes. That
Well, you
because
can
I
have
didn't.
5 minutes. You just have to go over there and register as a speaker, and we'll get you heard.
Okay, thank you
Okay.
very much.
You're welcome. Okay, so we'll address that when we get to it. No, do we have any declarations of interest for this panel, for any of the applications on this panel or any of the other panels? Any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. We have one application that has requested to be withdrawn, and that has to do with 13 Trump. So that application has been withdrawn at the request of the applicant. And we have one application that is requesting adjournment that has to do with 3780 Albion Road. A T. Bede, are you available? That's the agent for the applicant. Or is he online?
He's online, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Bede, are you there?
Hello, Mr. Chair. My name is Timothy Bede from PO10 Planning and Design. Representing
I understand you'd like to adjourn this application.
Yes, this adjournment was at the request of city staff, and we oblige.
Okay, and you would like to have it adjourned to the 17th of September, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there were some pieces of information that were requested to be added to the tree conservation report. which we agreed to provide, and we'll have completed and ready to circulate before that date. And so we think the 17th is adequate time to circle back on this.
Okay, that's great. So I'd like to ask the panel if they'd like to adjourn this application to the 17th of September. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application has been adjourned to the 17th of September. Thank you, Mr. Bede.
Thank you, Chair and Committee.
So now we're going to move on to those items that are on the unopposed application list. We have 4 items that are unopposed. And the criteria for being an unopposed application and to be on this fast track agenda is as follows. There are no objections or concerns from the parties, that is the applicant, city, or the public. There are no amendments required. No registered speakers. The sign posting declaration has been received. The applicant or the agent has confirmed that they agree with all requested conditions, if any. And there are no questions from panelists. So we have these 4. The first one is having to do with 1494 Kilbourne. I'd like to ask the panel if they'd like to approve this application. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Item number 2 is 848 Broadview. All those in favor of this application, please raise your hands. That application is approved. And next item is 1551 Versailles. And I'd like to ask the panel if they'd like to approve this application. All those in favor? Application is approved. And the last application is 1353 Gossett. All those in favor of approving this application, please raise your hands. That application is also approved. Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the applications. We'll hear them in order. And the next application we'd like to hear is having to do with 81 Burland. Mr. Robinson, are you available? Please go ahead, Mr.
Good afternoon, panel and members. Yes, so the application before you today is at 81 Burland to allow for the construction of a low-rise apartment building. If the coordinator could go, probably best to go to, I think it's pages 12 or 13. Actually, 13 and 14, sorry. Further on, please. Continue, please. Continue. Continue. Thank you. So the property at 81 Burland is in an arterial Main Street zone, which allows a number of commercial and residential uses, including a low-rise apartment. It could contain a restaurant, automotive sales, and some other commercial uses. It is in the same zoning category as the properties to the south, which front onto Carling Avenue, and also I believe the property to the east, which is a barber shop. To the south, which would be on the right-hand side of the image that's on the screen, is an automotive car sales location. And then at the top right of the image is a property that is an Apple Auto Glass facility. Then behind it is a building that is used as a barber shop. Directly opposite the property is a 3-unit commercial building that has got a restaurant, another barber shop, and a location that I believe sells or rents canopies and awnings. And then to the north, the rest of the block to the north, which contains, including this property, it contains 16 residential properties. The variances that are being requested today, there are 3 of them. There is a interior side yard setback on the north side, which is shown by the purple dashed line. Because this is in an AM zone and there is the potential for commercial uses on this property, it's my understanding that there is a greater than standard side yard setback in that zone to adjacent residential properties. The requirement is for 7.5 meters. We're asking for a 3-meter setback, which would be fairly standard between a low-rise apartment and a residential property. The setbacks between our proposed building and the existing building to the north is 7.32 meters, of which 3 meters is on our client's property. And then there are 2 somewhat related variances, and they're related to parking. The parking requirement in this zone for a low-rise apartment is 1.2 spaces per unit for resident parking and 0.2 spaces per unit for visitor parking. So 1.2 multiplied by 7 units equals 8.4, which is reduced or rounded down to 8 spaces. And the visitor parking requirement of 0.2 spaces per unit multiplied by 7 units is 1.4, and that is also rounded down to 1 space. As many people in the committee and involved in these applications are aware, the city is undergoing a new zoning bylaw. It has no status yet. It is still subject to further community consultation, council deliberation, and a vote. But the proposal that is before you would be compliant for under the version of the bylaw that staff have issued. I think it was in May. So this development would not require any variances. We have 3 parking spaces. Staff have no issue with the reduction for the resident parking. And it would be in the leases for these units that there would be a supplementary payment if you wanted to have a parking space. That would only be available for the first 3 who wanted to exercise that option. Any additional further tenants would be, it would be in their lease that they do not have an on-site parking, and that permanent off-street parking is not available, and that it would only be visitor parking that is available. The visitor parking situation is on the west side of Burland only. There is a 3-hour limit from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. weekdays.
Please continue.
Yeah, thank you. 6 hours, I think 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekends. I looked in all the documentation I could find, including the Bay Ward Bulletin website, and there is no restriction on visitor parking in overnight. There's also no restriction on seasonal parking. Some streets have seasonal parking limitations. Obviously, there are limitations or restrictions when there is a winter storm situation that is broadcast in local media. We're all aware when you can't park on the street. So that is the parking situation. The building height is 9.98 meters, not we can build up to 11 meters. It's 9.98 meters. That was a comment related from one of the neighbors. We are underneath the maximum building height. And in terms of, there was also a comment about shadowing. We're 25 meters from the closest point of our property to the closest point of their property. And I think it's about a 40-meter difference between from building to building. There was also a comment about making reference to septed and that there is a parking space hidden. We're trying to maximize, make the most efficient use of the area in the rear for the parking. As we are aware, we cannot have front yard parking, so we have put the parking in the rear, and we think it's best suited to have 3 available parking spaces for residents only, rather than further reduce their requirement and provide a visitor parking space, which was, I believe, something that planning had raised. It's a 7-unit building. 2 are 1-bedroom units, including 1 barrier-free, and there are 5 2-bedroom units. The owners have agreed to provide, to pay half the costs for 6 months of OC Transpo Presto passes to encourage the people who are going to be moving into this building to take full advantage of the public transit that is on Carling, which can get you to Bayshore and to the Lincoln Fields transfer points quite easily. So those are my comments. I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I move on to the panel and ask the panel if they have any questions. Ms. McLean? Ms. Wright? Mr. Barrett? Okay, now I'd like to turn to planning services. Elizabeth King, do you have any comments to make with respect to this application?
Hi, not much to add. As mentioned in the staff report, we don't have concerns with the reduced side yard or the reduced parking requirement for resident parking. We don't have concerns for the resident parking because I feel the applicant and the homeowners have provided a lot of alternatives, including the bicycle parking. The agent also mentioned it's in close proximity to a lot of the major transit areas. Sorry. However, we do have some concerns with the visitor parking spaces because it's really hard to mitigate some of the mitigate not having at least 1 visitor space. It was a suggestion prior to this application coming in that at least 1 of those 3 could be considered for visitor spaces. However, they decided to proceed with just the 3 for resident parking. That's all I really have to say. My only other thing I've got in my notes here is that it is rated very highly in the 15-minute neighborhood in terms of the official plan. But aside from that, I can take any further questions if the panel has any. So
Thank you. Now, panel, do you have any questions, Ms. McLean? Ms. Wright? No. Mr. Barrett? No, no further questions? Okay. Now I'd like to move on to the public, and we have 1 registered speaker that was from before, and this lady up here as well. But we'll first go to the Mr. Alex Cullen, if you'd like to come up and make some comments, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee, for taking the time to hear from us today. My name is Alex Cullen. I live at 36 Burland Street, which is just 1 block away from this property. I've lived on the street for 15 years. I'm also the past president of the Belltown Neighbors Association, which is a community association living in Belltown. Belltown is between Britannia Park and Hayden Park, the river, and Carling Avenue, where this the subject property is located. Yes, you are dealing with a minor variance for 81 Burland Street, and I'm here to speak to the parking restrictions and our concern about the inadequacy of what is being proposed here. My request to the committee is to reject this application on that basis in terms of the required parking for this 7-unit low-rise. I don't have a problem with the density, but there is an issue with the parking. So in my view, the application fails the test of being desirable. The 4 tests, of course, you're all familiar with, but the test of being desirable from a planning and public interest point of view is there insufficient on-street parking available in Burland Street to compensate for the reduction of parking spaces being proposed on site. As you've been told, there is no parking on the east side of Burland Street. In fact, most of Belltown has restrictions on at least 1 side of the street. There are businesses in close proximity to 81 Burland Street that use on-street parking on the west side of Burland Street, a used car dealership abutting 81 Burland Street on the south side, a canopy awning company, barbershop, and takeout food store immediately opposite 81 Burland Street on the west side of the street. As you heard, there are 16 residences on Burland Street between Carling Avenue and Walter. That's the block that we're talking about. Which regularly use on-street parking on the west side of Burland Street. In fact, the takeout food is late at night. The barber shop is by appointment and often goes into the evening. So that's the planning and public interest point of view, and I think you're going to hear more about this. I should mention that the used car lot is facing Carling Avenue, and there's no parking obviously on Carling Avenue. It's a very busy arterial, and the canopy, the 3 units that on the west side that go up to Carling Avenue. There is a strip mall with 3 food stores, a bakery, and a pawn shop right there facing Carling Avenue. So it's a busy intersection. There's no pedestrian crossing at Burland and Carling Avenue. The applicant also fails the test of being consistent with the current zoning bylaw, and the committee knows it has to adhere to the current zoning bylaw, which requires adequate parking for multi-unit residences and set standards to achieve this. The applicant does refer to the draft zoning bylaw. I'm a past president of the Federation of Citizens Associations. I know this is very active at the moment with public input. And the draft zoning bylaw, as you know, is not enforced, still in public consultation stage, and may be amended by City Council. Further, 81 Burland Street is 1.6 kilometers from the nearest transit station, Bayshore, which is a 22-minute walk according to Google Maps, at least. The other 2 rapid transit stations, which by the way, will not be ready until 2027, as I'm told. That further away is Pinecrest and Lincoln Fields, but the closest is Bayshore. Lastly, the application fails the test of being minor, as the proposed reduction in residential and visitor parking spaces from 9 to 3 is not insignificant. We believe is substantial, particularly as there is inadequate on-street parking to compensate for the loss of on-site parking at 81 Burland Street. I think the panel knows that in 2022, the average number of cars per household in Ottawa was 1.33, and only 14% of residences or households, I should say, in Ottawa did not have a car. So there's going to be cars at this spot, and it has to be accommodated one way or the other. I know there's a condition being put on the lease, but I also know that people drive cars. And that our problem is the amount of space available for not only the businesses that are there, that are in close proximity to this application, the 16 residences that are on the street. That bungalow that you see that is being redeveloped is right beside a triplex, as a matter of fact. So on-street parking is an issue, which is why I'm here. And I'm ready for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. I'd like to ask the panel if they have any questions for Mr. Cullen, Mr. Barrett. Ms. Wright? No. Ms. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The commercial across the street from this proposal, do they have any parking, or are they all relying on the street, on-street parking?
They have 1 or 2 spaces in front of the store. But as I walk up and down there frequently, there's overflow on the rest of the street. So they can't accommodate more than 2 cars. In fact, the awning place really can only accommodate itself in a truck. But often we have at the barber shop 5 or 6 cars on the street, and at the takeout food place, it's very good Jamaican food if you like it, also travels down the street. So it is an issue. As well, the strip mall at just immediately to the south has 20 spaces for the 3 restaurants, the bakery, and the pawn shop. During the day, not a problem, but in the evening, obviously, there's an overflow issue. One other item I forgot to mention, the proponent in his application talks about access to cycling on Carling Avenue. Don't do it. It is a major arterial. There are no bike lanes. Traffic is very busy. It is not bike friendly whatsoever. So saying that there's going to be bike spaces at this particular spot, not on Carling Avenue. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cullen.
Yeah.
Now we have one more speaker, I believe. I think that's this lady right here that came up earlier.
Hello, again, good afternoon. As I said, I only found out late yesterday, so I'm not as prepared, but actually all the points I wanted to make have mostly been addressed, and it's really to do with the parking. And I'm Denise Downing. I live at 66 Burland Street, and my mother lives at 70 Burland Street. So we're within that 60-meter space. And the problem, my mother's lived there over 50 years, and I've lived there close to. So I can give you some good advice. There's been a problem, and especially in the last 2 years with parking, and it's since the auto place has moved in on Carling Avenue. I've noticed, especially this past summer, that at least 4 of the employees park on the street from 10 to 6. As well as there's other people coming and going in the meantime. And that's a huge problem. Both my mother and myself and my neighbor and other neighbors on the street, there's always 2 cars parked in front of the street all summer long. And once the winter comes, and plus because of the restaurants that you'll be parking right across from, there's often people just stopping right there, and even in front of the fire hydrant that's there, and they leave their car there, and a lot of times they'll sit there and have a barbecue, there's a barbecue there, or the takeout. So a lot of times it's because they can't park on the other side of the street because it's constantly full of cars. So it's a big problem. And one of the points I was going to mention too about Carling Avenue, you do not want to be driving a bicycle on Carling Avenue. It's quite dangerous. And like Bayshore is the closest, and the 85, which is mentioned in the information I got, the bus, it does not come every 15 minutes. I mean, that's ideal, but a lot of times it's late, the winter time too. So there is one bus that comes down there, 85, and it's very slow. It's a very slow going bus. And also, I was made aware that the parking spaces in this building for the residents, they're not even as big as they're supposed to be. They're a little bit smaller actually than what is. And in the winter, people don't use bikes. I mean, very few people use bikes. I'm not in any way against the building, but the parking it's huge. It is huge on this particular street. And I had to come today to say that it's not a small issue. There's already a big issue on the street with the parking. And, and most people do have 2 cars, and a lot of people aren't even on the bus route. If you're not on the bus route and you need a car to get to work, you have to have a car. There is 3-hour parking, but people park a lot longer. And even for the people that park that are at this car place that I've mentioned that I noticed, they'll just come out and move their car, a spot or 2 or have a look. So, and often, and as well, my neighbors have mentioned to me that's something I don't particularly notice, is that sometimes they park cars with unlicensed on the street while they're moving things around. And so that's a big problem too. So I don't know what else to say then.
Okay.
People need parking, people have visitors, and I don't think they're going to tell their visitors to come by bus.
Okay. The panel might have some questions for you.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Mr. Barrett, do you have any questions for? No? Ms. Wright? Ms. McLean? Okay. There are no
Okay.
questions. Thank you very
More?
much.
Okay, thank you. But I mean, just to end, it's not just me and these few people that are here. It's everybody on the street who have been complaining for a long time. And the parking is a problem. I even noticed on the street going in both directions, there's people parking. So it's not even like you can park a block away. This morning I was walking my dog, and I had to go up right in the middle of the street. The car had to stop. I had to go around because there was a huge SUV on this side, on that side. And that's not just today, with having to walk as a person down the street. I mean, even getting out of my driveway because of the 2 cars, I almost hit somebody once. I mean, I'm always cautious that there's going to be a child or an animal or somebody that I'm going to back into because of all this parking.
Thank you,
So,
Mr. Lynn.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we'll go to the applicant, Mr. Robinson, have the last word.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Chair, perhaps we could put a call out To anyone in person or online, I see we do have a few people not on our speakers list online.
Okay, is there anyone else like to speak to this matter from the public?
Yes, we do have a Corey DeBow online. I'll add him in now.
All right, thank you.
He's the project designer.
He's the project designer, we're told from Mr. Robinson.
Okay, he has his hand raised, so maybe he wants to add something.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. DeBow. Mr. Corey DeBow, there you are.
Hey, good afternoon there, Mr. Chair and panel members. Thank you very much for having me this afternoon. I just wish to speak to those comments recently discussed. Just very quickly, just my 2 cents worth as a cycling nerd and as a designer and an aficionado of architecture. I just want to discuss perhaps some policies and the arguments that have recently been brought forth regarding parking. Just my own 2 cents here, but. I believe that these fail in certain ways. These assume that every tenant has a car or will have 1.3 cars, and that all spots on the road are always taken. And as we have surveyed, we have documented at least 9 spaces available. We also assume that we always need cars. That's not always true. As mentioned, there are groceries, there are malls nearby. I used to take the 85. I worked at the Coliseum. That was my very first job. So I have at least 14 years of experience taking that 85, which gets you nicely to Bayshore. Back when they used to be 90s buses, you used to be able to connect to the transitway there. Cycling, there may have been a misnomer. There is a path located along the Britannia pathway, which I use very frequently, and that gets me to Canada, to downtown. And it's always busy. I could tell you, like, I'm that guy with the bell, and it's always very, very busy. Lastly, I guess my last food for thought is that we're speaking of this from a street problem and not necessarily a site local problem. This is a transitional use. This considers that it's both commercial and residential. That is to say, we could develop this site, either as commercial or residential, but the inevitability of cars, if it were a commercial site, needs to be considered. And the fact that we're sort of transitioning down into residential use to try and play the good neighbor card, I feel is a good move. I don't know if it's been mentioned, but the target demographic for this building is certainly going to be, for newcomers, for the Brazilian community who may not have much, who don't have cars. I myself didn't have a car for a very long time. And, now unfortunately I have one. But, leading up to this point, we have to consider that it's a streetwide problem, and this may be an enforcement issue with the city bylaw. If people are, doing the old famous swap, moving their car up and down a few spots to park all day, that I feel wouldn't be fair to implicate our site based on people doing that. The fact that it is a street problem, really, there are a lot of properties on there, and I understand that this is a fairly heavy development relative to the single family dwelling, but it is in alignment with the city's official plan. It is, I believe, a good use of land, and I believe that is all I have to say. Thank you very much for having me. I just wish to put my 2 cents in there.
All right, thank you, Mr. DeBow. Does the panel have any questions for Mr. DeBow? That's right.
Just to address the neighbor's comment with respect to the size of the parking spaces, I imagine if it's going through city, I imagine they are to the correct size. Like, maybe you could just confirm that.
They are, of course. And I apologize. The drawings are a little bit, there was a lot of data on, I believe, SK2. There was a bit of kind of a zoom in on those parking stalls and how their turn circles and everything would interface. Those stalls were designed actually a bit wider than they needed to be. So technically, they're a little bigger than the city mandates Part 4 would call for. And they're actually wider to allow for that interior-most car on the right, single stall, to make that turn safely around the corner. That data is backed by the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's from my architecture book. It's all founded data. I have seen some optimistic parking configurations before, so I wanted to ensure that, to you folks, that this is proper and that, this can actually work. So I do certainly hope that those design criteria are met, and do apologize if it was unclear. The site plan has a lot of data, so I wanted to do a specific drawing to show that illustration.
Anything further, Ms. Wright? Mr. Barrett? No. Ms. McLean? Okay, we'll give him the last word. Okay, Mr. Robinson?
Thank you. Yes, as Mr. DeBow stated, the parking spaces they do meet or exceed the city zoning requirements. And there was a statement saying that we needed 9 resident parking spaces. It's actually 8. And as well, We've heard comments today and also written comments that there is overflow parking now. It appears that they're saying that some of the businesses nearby are not, they're having their employees parking on the street all day. That is an existing situation that should be addressed by city zoning bylaw or parking enforcement staff who either laser tag or chalk tires, and then you quickly change your parking patterns once that happens. I've looked on, I've been to the site a number of times. I've never had any trouble parking. I've always parked on the street for a brief period of time. If you look on Google Street View, there's actually a long period of photographic evidence going all the way back to October 2007 up to May 2023. There are actually 9 images, and the May 2023 image only shows 1 car on that entire west side of Burland from Carling to the cross street to the north. The most that ever was in 2007 when there were 3 cars. The most common place for a car to be parked appears to be between the 3-unit commercial building across the street from us and Carling Avenue. And it's kind of next to that plaza that Mr. Cullen spoke about that has, I think, 3 restaurants and a pawn shop. Obviously, Google Street View is just a momentary piece of in time, snapshot in time, but there's 9 images over time, and they are between May and October of the various years, and there's either 1, 2, or 3 cars parked on the west side. There are no cars ever shown on the east side of Burland, so obviously the no parking restrictions there seem to work. So our clients are committed to paying half the cost of an OC Transpo Presto Pass for 6 months to encourage residents to take advantage of that. And they will have, any that do have a permanent spot in the back are going to have to be paying more in rent than others. And the rest of them will be told there is no parking and there is only visitor parking for short-term parking for your visitors. So that's what I have to say, and I'm available for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since it's new construction, how many units could you put on there and comply with the bylaw?
With 3 parking spaces, you could. 3 would be, it'd be 4.2, so that wouldn't work. 2 would be 2.8, that would round up to 3. So it would be a duplex or 2-unit building.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Wright, any questions? No. Mr. Barrett? No? Okay, thank you very much. All right, so yes, ma'am. Well, if you'd like to come up to the microphone here, really you should have had an opportunity at the time when we asked the public to speak, ma'am. Okay. All right, so I'd like to ask the panel if they'd like to reserve on this application. All those in favor to reserve, please raise your hands. So we're going to reserve on this application, Mr. Robinson, and you'll get our answer in about 10 days.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay. Now we're moving on to application number 5, having to do with 185 Kamloops. And I'm looking for Ms. Jennifer Murray, please. No, it's not. There you go.
Yeah, good afternoon. Jennifer Murray, Terrain Development Consulting, 45 Spencer Street, Suite 101.
And if you'd like to give us a brief description of your application today, that would be appreciated.
Yes, so this file, 185 Kamloops, is for a minor variance for height to reduce or to increase the permitted height from 8.0 to 8.51. 185 Kamloops is in the Revelstoke neighborhood on the west side of Riverside Drive, south of Walkley Road. It was previously severed through consent, and there are two homes being built on the property. One is already under construction by a different owner. And this subject site does have a building permit issued, and the owner was proceeding ahead with construction when they had sort of a geotechnical recommendation that the footing of the building should be raised to respond to sort of site conditions related to groundwater. So the city engineering requirements is to be 1 foot, the underside of footing above high water. And so there's a technical requirement to raise the building. So we've provided sort of a full planning letter and showing how it meets the 4 tests. I've had a chance to review the city staff's report also and agree with what they've stated. So basically the variance is required to bring the project in conformance with the city's zoning bylaw and engineering standards. And 8.5 is a very standard height that's permitted in many of the R1 zones in the city. So it will have no negligible impact. I don't think it would be discernible from the street by anyone looking at the building. I do understand there was a few comments from residents. I've had a chance to review them. I've had a chance to respond to one of them who I believe withdrew. One of them withdrew their concerns when I explained sort of the variance that had been requested. So those, I guess those are my comments. Happy to answer any more detailed questions. And
Okay.
yeah.
All right, I'll ask the panel if they have any questions for you. Ms. Wright?
I don't know.
Mr. Barrett? Ms. McLean? No, no questions. So now I'd like to move on to then planning services. Elizabeth King, can you give us some comments, please, on this application?
Hi, not much to add. Planning staff have no concerns. It's a very minor height increase. So if you guys have any questions, happy to take them or clarify anything else further.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wright, do you have any questions for me? No, Mr. Barrett? Ms. McLean? No, no further questions there. Okay, now I'd like to ask if there's anybody from the public that would like to ask any questions or make their comments known. No questions or comments from the public. Okay, well, you've got the last word, Ms. Murray, if you'd like to go ahead.
I guess I don't want to push too much, but the client is waiting to decide whether they should resubmit the building permit and move ahead. So the only thing I was going to ask is whether it's possible to get an oral decision or if you're still providing oral decisions, but otherwise, win your hands, and thank you very much for your time.
Okay. I'd like to ask the panel if they'd like to reserve on this application. All those in favor to reserve, please raise your hands. It's going to be reserved, and so you'll get our answer in 10 days.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to our next application, having to do with 2181 Quinn. And I'm looking for, I'm gonna butcher this name. I'm really apologize to Mr. Semenowitz. Okay, thank you. And so the applicant sits on this side. No, you sit up, the applicant sits on this side, and then if there's anybody from the public, they will sit on the opposite side. Please state your name and your address, sir.
Okay, my name is Chris Szymanowicz, and the application is for 2181 Quinn Crescent. The owner is designing to add to make addition, to make extension to existing 2-story single family house, residential, of course, and to accommodate 2 cars. Right now, existing building has inbuilt 1 single car garage, and the intention is to extend the building to accommodate double garage and the storage space, serving the intended charging station for cars. In order to organize the lot and existing building the right way, we need to encroach the side setbacks for this existing house from required 1.2 meters to 0.6 meters, and also the combination of both setbacks has to be reduced too. I think this in my cover letter, I pointed out the for test for what is called the fourth or issue test for the minor variances. So this proposal is really minor because it doesn't it goes together with the official plan for residential area and the zoning, and the density of development is not amended, and also it fits with the general purpose of the zoning bylaw, which of course stipulates the residential character of the zone, and it's maintained. The house is quite large, existing house, accommodating large family, and simply extension from the single car garage to double car garage is kind of living necessity at this stage. Existing house has a shed which is built which has been built in the past before the owner bought the house, and it's 0.3 meters from the lot line, which is of course not respecting the required setbacks. This shed will be demolished in the proposal, and the extension will be built instead. So basically, that's the basic proposal of the application.
Okay.
Just to reduce the side setback and accommodated setbacks for side. And one note: when anybody is looking at the delivered drawings, usually north is supposed to be on the top of drawing. On my drawings, north is on the left side, just to follow the survey configuration for the lot. So the application relates to the northern and southern setbacks in this case. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So just to be certain about the variance that you are looking for, I understand there was a little bit of an error made in the minimum total side setback required. It was noted that it was 3.5 meters. In fact, it's supposed to be 3.6 meters. Is that correct, Madam Secretary?
That's correct, and maybe the planner could confirm, because that's from the planning report.
Okay. Can I ask you to confirm that, please, Ms. King?
Yeah, I just confirmed it. It was on the notice. When I compared from the notice to the application form, it was just a slight error from 3.5 to 3.6.
And do we need variance B?
No, so when you read that in the zoning bylaw, that whole provision of the total side yard and the individual yards are read as one provision. So just for clarity's sake, you really only need the one variance.
One variance. Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
so I assume there are gonna be two variances, but thanks to the explanation, then the variance seeked is just one.
Just one, correct. Okay, I'd like to ask the panel if they have any questions for the applicant. Mr. Barrett, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Just to clarify, in looking at one of your drawings, the parking in the garage, is it two cars back to back, or? And
In
then
the proposal,
in the proposal, and then the storage space at the rear, is that?
no, side to side,
Side to side,
and the storage is in the rear.
okay. So the two parking spaces are side to side,
Correct,
and the storage is in the back.
yes.
And the
that's true.
charging stations are where? At the front of the garage?
This is the kind of detail electrical issue which is not yet resolved.
Okay.
Because this is not yet building permit process, right? So
Yes,
the level of detail is not that
it's not there, yes,
it's not determined somewhere in the garage space, yes.
thank you.
Ms. Wright, do you have any questions for the panel? No? Ms. McLean? Okay, thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask planning Elizabeth King if you've got some comments to make.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to note that we did have some concerns with this proposal, primarily just being that with this proposal, there isn't external access to the rear yard from the front yard. So even though the reductions only affecting one side, I guess the assumption would be that you could still access the backyard from the opposite side. So the north side, which is set back 2.2 meters. However, just through some additional looking into the building, staff noted that, and also confirmed from the applicant, that there is a deck that's 0.8 meters above grade and also an AC unit on that north side. So it is going to inhibit access, because obviously that's going to be a bit hard to take a big step up to 0.8 meters above grade. I do know, and I did receive the revised elevation drawing, sorry, goodness. That they did submitted a garage door on the back side of the house, so it would provide internal access to that rear yard, but there isn't going to be easy external access, especially to have like a walkway or something to access that rear yard. So that's really just where our concerns are coming from. Yeah, that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel, Mr. Barrett, if you have any questions for Ms. King.
No.
Ms. Wright?
No, I don't.
And Ms. McLean? No questions. Okay. So the last word goes to you, sir. Oh, we've got some panel members. I'm sorry. I forgot that there is some people from the public who'd like to speak on this. So and again, I apologize for messing up the name because I don't know how to say it correctly. Ron Agoniak. Okay. Come on down. Again. Yeah, you have to press the button on the machine and there you go.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Ron Oganek. I'm the resident of 2187 Quinn Crescent, the resident to the south of the proponent. I guess to start off with, if you could just raise the second page of my document that I submitted just on the screen so that people can see it. It just helps us situate the side yard of our home. The second page, please. This is our current side yard. This is the south of the proponent's house. You can see they're kind of where their car is. Our kitchen door barbecue is located there. We've got two window wells landscaped in as shown. Next photo, please. That's looking the opposite direction, so you can see the other window well, our kitchen door again, the shed in question, the retaining wall, and the fence. Next page, please. So the top picture, and I guess what I'd like to do is just focus on my main concern here, because there's been a number of discussion points going back and forth on, the pros and cons of the side yard setback variance request. And my position is that for me, there's one principal issue here, and that's the ice and snow falling from the roof. There has been a history of this over the past few years of, prior to me living on Quinn Crescent, and since I've been on Quinn Crescent, the neighbor to the north has had 2 incidences where snow has slid off the roof and removed his fence or damaged the fence. The previous homeowner had snow sliding off the front of the roof. Destroyed the front hood of his daughter's car. We've had snow slide on our side, which removed 2 sections of fence panel. There were mitigation measures put in place. There, were obviously when the house was modified, there would have been plans submitted, materially certified, snow slide clips put in place. However, they failed to work. There's also one area of quite grave concern. If you go to the next picture, please, next page. The way the roof is designed, you'll see in the top picture, there's one center section of that roof, which funnels through a roughly 0.7 meter opening in between those 2 gables. This is an area that sees extreme ice and snow loading through the winter, extreme water flow over the eaves trough in the summer. It's my view becomes a bit unmanageable, but it hasn't been a concern for me as a adjacent property simply because this currently falls onto the yard behind his garage. Consequently, through the I would say freeze-thaw cycles, that water through the winter permeates along the south of his existing garage, and neighbors all see him chipping away ice through the winter quite regularly. Both Tony and Sue, the homeowners of that house, myself and my wife Natalie, we have 3 kids. They're told not to play in this area at all because there's often quite a large pile of snow that lands in that section of their yard. It's a real hazard. It's not a what if this could happen. It does happen today. There are mitigation measures that have been taken. I think from my perspective, it's a matter of have they been installed correctly? Have they been maintained? And have they been repaired when they're damaged? And history has shown so far that, these areas can be questionable. I mean, if the snow had slid down and our children had been in that side yard at that time, somebody would have been gravely hurt. When I talked to Tony about this last night, raising my concern, he asked me whether I'd actually seen the snow fall myself and put into question that somebody getting hurt was just my opinion. And I guess what I'd like to do is read a text from my wife who witnessed this happening. The day that happened on February the 8th at 11:23 in the morning. Hi, Sue, just to let you know, a whole bunch of snow fell off your roof onto the side of the house and broke the fence under its own weight, right in front of my own eyes. So glad there was no kids there. Seemed pretty heavy snow. Now, if we slide back up to the previous page, you can see that opening in this picture, and you can also see the garage extension. And my concern is that the way the drawings have been submitted, the fascia board is within 0.3 meters of the property line, and we're at a lower elevation. And that new existing roof line is just a rampway onto our property, and I see it as a significant hazard. There's other points that I'd like to raise. I mean, I know I'm out of time, sorry. The response to my submission by my neighbor, I would argue that there's blatant lies in this submission that he's presented. I don't know whether I will have an opportunity to respond to that. And my point to him last night when he spoke to me for the very first time on what he was planning to do in his variance request was, I said, if you want a garage, like knock your boots off, let's build a garage, but not at the expense of the safety of our children and not so close to our property. And so if there's some room to negotiate on relief on side yard setback, I am completely open to that. But I want the hazard to fall on the side yard of the home where it comes from, not on top of mine. Thank you.
I've got a question for you. Does the addition of the garage, does it make this situation worse or does it improve it?
Well, I would say the hazard, I mean, we all know that falling ice and snow, whether it rolls, slides or falls, is very unpredictable. I think that there are, devices that can be put in place to help reduce risk as much as possible. I'm an engineer by trade, a professional engineer in the province of Ontario. I would say that in most design practices, the best practice is to design the risk out of the equation so that the risk is eliminated, not reduced. As I said, these mitigation measures are subject to proper installation, maintenance, and repair. And you can see from the photograph I've submitted on page 2, the fence has been left open like that since it happened in February 2023. There's been no repair. There's nails sticking out of the wood. The homeowner claims the fence is his. From his survey that he submitted to the panel, I mean, it's clear that the fence is 100% on my side of the property line. And so the fact that it hasn't been repaired, I've left it to him because he claims the fence is his. It's just been installed on my side of the line.
So I guess the answer is that this is not going to improve the situation. It's just going to have the same situation.
The situation is gonna get worse for me because right now the hazard is on his property. And so his kids are told not to play there, and we tell our kids not to traverse there either. The kids play with each other all the time. We have 3 kids in our house, they have 2. We have a family of 5, he has a family of 4. He's talking about electric car chargers in his garage. He just bought an Audi A7. I'm not sure that how the electric car charging fits into that equation, but it's not going to make the situation worse. It's going to put the problem on our side of the property line. As I said, I am completely 100% in favor of a garage extension. I get it. We all have full garages, but not at the expense of the safety of our family and our children.
Okay, thank you. Any of the other panel members have any questions, Mr. Barrett?
Just a question to clarify, is the roof asphalt shingles or is it steel roof?
The existing roof is steel.
Well, in your professional opinion, does that add to the issue of the amount of freeze thaw that's going on and how quickly the snow can move off that roof? Or was there any ice jam mechanisms put in place originally? When
this was originally modified or renovated, there were ice management devices in place. They were broken. So again, an item not repaired and an item not repaired, that's a safety item, is going to lead to a problem. I mean, it's I think exacerbated by the fact that this is a south-facing roof. It's metal. If this was a north-facing roof, I think the risk would be much less. It would stay frozen. But there's significant freeze thaw because of the south-facing roof, and we see that falling in that pathway that I've indicated in between the 2 dormers. It goes through a melt. It goes down along the side of his existing garage, and we all see the 6 inches of ice along that section of his garage. That will end up on basically our side because there's a 1-foot retaining wall that's roughly 1 inch on his side of the line. So the plans that were submitted showed the fascia board 0.3 meters in, which I think is really needs to include the eaves trough. It's 0.3 meters to the edge of the eaves trough, not to the fascia board. It was in my submission to the panel. But if you look at overflowing eaves trough or ice coming off the roof, that will squarely put it onto our side of the retaining wall. It's simply asking too much. And I mean, again, I'm willing to negotiate on the side yard setback. I think that we're all living in kind of more modernized, modern homes, that we need more space, bigger homes, bigger garages. But when I look around our neighborhood and the significant amount of infill construction that's taken place, there's no side yard setback that I've come across thus far that's 0.6 meters. They're all respecting the 1.2 meter setback. They typically have flat roof or low pitch roof because they're trying to achieve a maximum height restriction. And so the risk of falling snow and ice is much less. The retaining wall, I think, exacerbates the situation. It's just a really, there's many reasons why I think this is a bad plan.
Just another question with regards to the grade and drainage of your property and his property. Today, is the grade and drainage working? And how do you think it will be impacted with this proposal?
Yeah, so the drainage, I mean, yes, that is a concern because of the fact that we're on the low side of the retaining wall. Right now, I indicated in my submission that it is manageable. I have landscaped my pavers in such a way that the high point is kind of midway in the depth of my home, so it drains to the backyard and it drains to the front yard. His is typically higher than mine, and his backyard is higher than his front yard, so it tends to drain from the back to the front. So that area where you get the largest amount of rainfall that kind of overflows the eaves troughing and falls behind his current garage, it stays on his property, it's grass there, and then it migrates its way around the corner of the garage and then down his driveway. But because of the excessive width of the driveway, again, not meeting the bylaw, I don't think this was a comment made by the Development Information Officer from the City of Ottawa. The fact that it is so wide, it does tend to run all down his driveway. The retaining wall is about 3/4 of an inch higher than his pavers, so it kind of keeps it on the pavers and on his side, which is good. But the proposal putting it this close, the overflow will come on top of the retaining wall, and we all know how gravity works. It's gonna fall down to the lower elevation. There is, just a general concern, a significant amount of water runoff given the size of the roof and the size of the hard surfaces on the driveway. I think the property could benefit from having more soft surface and be compliant with the driveway width bylaw. I think this is not helping the situation, and I mean, it's not just individually my problem, but a citywide problem of having too many hard surfaces in our subdivisions.
Ms. Wright?
As a professional engineer, do you see any possibility of a redesign of the roof that would satisfy the runoff issues? And I'm thinking putting a parapet, having a flat roof and having a parapet along.
Absolutely. So I talked to Tony about that last night when he came to me for the first time to talk to me about the plans, and I said there are design alternatives. Are you open to discuss these? He said flat out no, that they have the plan that they like. I do think that there's lots of room here to redesign. In my opinion, it would be beneficial to have that section of the garage extension to have a low slope roof where it's sloping to the backyard and to the front yard. It changes the direction physically of the snow load and ice in such a way that it keeps it on the roof and it directs it away from any side yard activity. And so I just don't think that these things have been explored. I think that they've come up with a plan that they like and it suits their needs. It's the maximum width that gives them the most largest garage at the expense of the people around them. And unfortunately, they haven't been able to recognize that or negotiate it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. McLean, any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Do we have anybody else from the public that would like to speak? Sure, come on up. Sure, come on up.
Mr. Chair, my name is Anthony McDonald, owner at 2181 Quinn. My wife's behind in the seats. I just wanted to go through the points that Ron made to just let you know why those points are wrong or have inaccuracies. Firstly, he did say that I responded to his complaint or whatever it's called with, I think he called them lies. I'm not going to be so rude to call his lies, but definitely inaccuracies. I did not lie in my rebuttal, but I'll start with where he started on the ice and snow falling on the north and south side. We've been there 6 years in the home. I've got no knowledge of any snow falling on the north side and breaking any fences. I've never had a complaint from the neighbors on the north side. Now, the snow that Ron mentioned fell on the south side and broke the fence. That was due to failed icebreakers that were plastic installed by the original owner or last owner. We didn't realize that they had been broken. As soon as it happened, so he referenced the text message from his wife to mine. That was, I believe it was February 8th, right after we had the new icebreakers installed, which are much larger metal icebreakers, and there hasn't been an issue since. Ron talked about overflowing eaves troughs and causing a problem. We've never had an issue with overflowing eaves troughs. He said that he can see it from his window. I've never noticed it, but it's never caused any problems. He mentioned the freeze thaw in the winter and me chipping ice in the driveway. We have a snowplow service, and as you know, snowplow services don't scrape right down to the asphalt or the pavers. They leave probably by the end of the winter at least 6 inches to a foot. That's what I was chipping off. It has nothing to do with what came off the roof. Ron mentioned that we tell our children they're not allowed to play on that side of the house. After the snow came down, we said don't play there until the new icebreakers are installed. Since then, there's been no issue. They're allowed to play there. There's no problem. Ron said that the first time I spoke to him was last night. There's a couple issues here. Ron had told me a few years ago when I had mentioned a possible addition that he was going to be in strong opposition of that. I did not want to invite any conflict, so I didn't go to him with this, but I did go to Natalie, his wife, on, I believe it was April 28th of this year. We did have a sign. We've changed contractors. We had a sign from Amstead, the first contractor we were using. The sign was on the lawn all winter. Anyone could have approached us and asked what was going on. They could have. There was nothing, but we did also approach his wife in April. You asked if the addition of the roof could improve the situation. My contractor is here can speak to that. The new roof over the garage extension would be a much lower sloped roof. And he said he thinks it will definitely improve that situation. So you're not going to have the same velocity that you did with the snow and ice and rain coming off the current sloped roof and, gaining speed and coming off the roof. This is going to be much more gentle, and there's going to be icebreakers there. If anything, it should definitely improve that situation. Ron mentioned he's an engineer. I don't know what kind of engineer he is. I can almost guarantee nothing related to this. Ron mentioned that the fence is on his property. I've always been told, and we did have the survey done, as far as I know, that fence is still on my property. There are no nails coming out of the fence. There's no issue right now. I have no reason to reinstall that piece of fence right now or ever if it's mine and on my property. It doesn't serve any real purpose other than creating separation between us and the neighbor. Ron mentioned the car that I just bought, the car that has a manufacturer date of 2018. So that puts us, going into its 7th year. Everything's going electric. Sooner or later, we will be replacing that car, but with an electric car. But my wife's car that I've made a deposit on, a new one already, is a plug-in. So we need to do something there, and that's the best situation for us. Ron mentioned that going through the neighborhood, there's no other side yard setbacks that have been reduced as we're asking for. Simply not true. That's why I brought my contractor. He's worked in the area for a very long time, worked for a huge developer, Uniform Developments. I think that's about it. But he's saying in our neighborhood, there's tons of these. So it's not a very big minor variance we're asking for. 0.6 meter reduction. That's less than 2 feet. We're talking about coming in like that far. It's not a lot. Sorry, just my last point. Ron said that there were other options for the roof. We've discussed, we've got our planner, Chris, here, and our contractor, Brandon. There aren't other options for this. Chris acknowledged when we asked him about putting slope the other way that it doesn't work in this case. Thank you very much.
Now, do we have any questions for Mr. McDonald, Mr. Barrett?
No.
Ms. Wright? Ms. McLean? Okay, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Simanowitz, you have the last word, sir.
As my predecessors mentioned, really the main issue of this extension is the water and ice management. I agree with that. And it's not the situation unable to resolve, technically speaking. There are ways of doing this. There are ice stoppers. There are many sites of gutters, eavesdrops. There are amount of downspouts used. This is the kind of technical detailing which is not resolved on this level of design. Design development will follow. There are ground trenches which could be used. There are many ways of dealing with this problem. I agree. This is an issue to be resolved. It will be resolved in the phase of the building permit. In terms of last note, in terms of the roof shape for this size of addition and the terrain configuration, this is the optimal solution. Letting the runoff go backwards, it doesn't make much sense. This would be upway, and then the water would have to go back down anyways. So this side sloped roof is the only optional feasible solution. And it's, as Anthony mentioned, its slope is much lower. So really it does improve the eventual ice falling down situation, because it will fall on that roof then. And then we could have ice stoppers, and we could have proper runoff management from roofs. And this is the technical issue which is to be resolved. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'd like to ask the panel if they'd like to reserve on this application. All those in favor to reserve, please raise your hands. So we're going to reserve on this application. You'll receive notification of our decision within 10 days or in 10 days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, moving on to our last application of the day. This application has to do with 2894 Bank Street. I'm looking for an R. Talarico. Mr. Talarico?
Hello, Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
I can, yes, a little low, but we're gonna fix that situation.
I'll try to speak up. My name is Ross Talarico. I'm the agent and solicitor for the applicant. The purpose of this application is to sever 2894 Bank Street from 1648 Rosabella Avenue. These two properties were historically separate and distinct parcels for Planning Act purposes until they inadvertently merged in 2006, when the then registered owner of 2894 Bank Street became the registered owner of the abutting lands known municipally as 1648 Rosabella Avenue. The applicant became aware of this issue earlier this year when I received a requisition letter from the lawyer for the buyer of 2894 Bank Street requiring a severance of 2894 Bank to allow the closing of the sale to proceed. A copy of that requisition letter has been provided to the committee. That is the sole reason why the applicant has brought this application. There is no proposed development for either the proposed severed parcel nor the proposed retained parcel. However, the City Planning Department has proposed that the approval be subject to a number of conditions in its comments to this committee. As a result of communication with Elizabeth King of the City Planning Department, It's my understanding that city staff are prepared to remove conditions 2 and 7, but would like conditions 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to remain. Obviously, Ms. King can confirm that. I just wish to make brief submissions on these proposed conditions. Condition number 1 is asking for proof that there are independent water, sanitary, and storm connections for both the severed and the retained parcels. Each parcel contains a single detached dwelling, and these dwellings are over 100 feet apart. So in my view, respectfully, it's an unnecessary condition. Condition number 3, it's proposed that there be an agreement with the city acknowledging environmental noise. Again, respectfully, in my view, this is premature. No development on the site is proposed. Condition number 4 is a grading and drainage plan. There is no proposed alteration to the grading and drainage of the property. Moreover, my client, the applicant, has advised me that the property has never been the subject of any complaint regarding drainage. Perhaps the city can also confirm that. So again, no development is proposed, and such a condition is premature. Moving on to conditions 5 and 6, the city seeks a conveyance of a corner site triangle and a road widening along the side of the property, which runs along Rosebella Avenue. Again, there is no development proposed. Such conditions are premature. Moreover, the purpose of this application is to allow the sale of the property between the applicant and the buyer to move forward. These conditions materially alter the property which the applicant has already agreed to sell to an arm's length buyer. And I don't believe it's the role of this committee to impact contractual relations between private parties. In summary, whenever there is a proposed development for this site, then, in my view, respectfully, it would be appropriate for the city to seek to impose any such conditions at that time, but not currently. Those are my submissions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tallarico. Now I'd like to ask the panel if they have any questions for the applicant. Mr. Barrett?
Yes, just one, with regards to the conditions that you are saying are premature. I believe that many of them would be cleared very quickly if many of these conditions would be cleared by city staff quickly by following up on the conditions one at a time. The grade and drainage plan, for example, if it's not already been, is there a grade and drainage plan for either one of these sites? As for an example, I'm just choosing one of the conditions.
Are you asking?
Yes, I'm just asking.
No, I'm not aware of any such plan. Because there's never been a proposed development for the site.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wright, do you have any questions?
No, I do not.
Ms. McLean, no? Okay, thanks. All right, so now we'll move on to planning, and Ms. King, do you have any comments to make? I think
Yep.
We're going to want to talk a little bit about these conditions.
I'll
Okay.
just jump straight to conditions. You guys have read the report. So the only condition that planning staff are agreeable to removing is number 2, which is the noise study. That is the most onerous condition that is on there. Just kind of going down the line. So number 1, just approve separate servicing. From what infrastructure engineering told me, that's just to demonstrate independent services. It's to relocate survey. So it's like member Baltz just said, they seem to be very clearable and easy conditions to meet. Kind of like the grading and drainage plan. That's just a general survey to be prepared. With Condition number 2 being removed, so the noise study, planning staff would like the noise notice being that condition remaining, just so they do have that notice on title. Numbers 5, 6, and 7, so the corner site triangle and the road widening of Bank Street and Rosebella, those are all come from the official plan. So all these conditions are coming from the infrastructure engineering and also transportation engineering. We try to take these at their earliest convenience, but I will note conditions 6 and 7, they are if required. So if the applicant can demonstrate to the satisfaction of the applicable body in that condition that the road winding on Bank Street has already been obtained and Rosebella, then that condition is if required. So if it's already been taken, then those conditions are not needed. But from staff's perspective, these conditions seem fairly easy and they're very standard conditions, keeping in mind what we've reviewed. Hopefully that clarifies, but really the only condition that staff would like to can remove is number 2, but the rest should remain.
Oh, you're not to number 7? Because you did
No.
say number 7 at the front end of your discussion. Okay.
I don't believe we said 7. I only said number 2 was
Okay.
agreeable
Okay.
for
The
removal.
agent said 7 as well.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I
So
think
just
there's-
number 2. Okay.
Yeah, I think there was a misunderstanding because it was my impression from Ms. King's email that the 2 and 7 were being waived, but with regard to my comments regarding conditions 5 and 6, I would make the same submission with regard to condition 7, which deals with the road widening along Bank Street.
Right. Okay. All right. Any questions, Ms. McLean, for Ms. King?
No.
Okay. Ms. Wright? Okay. Mr. Barrett?
Yes, I just have a question to you, Ms. King. With regards to clearing up these conditions, what if the applicant was able to provide you with these conditions, how long would this take? Would it be a couple of weeks? I understand there's an issue with the sale of the property as well as wanting to move on with the buyer as well as, but I think there's also a need for the buyer to understand that these are conditions of the property that he's buying. So do you have any idea what timeline if we work with the seller here to get these conditions through the planning staff, how long would this take?
I can't really
No,
state
I
a certain
understand.
timeline, only because, for example, like independent services, grading and drainage, like those, all these conditions have come from our infrastructure engineering staff, so I can't really speak on how quickly they clear these conditions. Like I said, the road windings, that's if required, and they just have to be to the satisfaction of the surveying mapping branch of the city. Like, I'm not quite sure on what those timelines are. It's just going to be how quickly we can work with the applicant to address these, but that's really all I can provide at this time.
Thank you.
Just one more comment. Would these conditions be part of the purchase of sale to the lawyer? Would these conditions be part of the purchase of sale agreement with your buyer?
They're not, Mr. Chair, because, as is often the case with these applications, I mean, usually it's only after an application is approved for a severance, for instance, where, a seller or a vendor is aware of conditions and a buyer, he goes into a deal knowing what those conditions are. In this case, this was an agreement that was entered into very early this year. There was actually it was a May 15th closing date. And as a result of the inadvertent merger, we extended the deal to mid-September. It was extended to September the 16th, which even that is not going to be a sufficient extent. It's not going to be enough time to get it closed, because I would imagine it'll take 10 days or so for the committee to render its decision. So we would probably have to get another extension. But I mean, clearly, if any of these conditions are imposed, it changes the nature of the deal. And I just don't know if it's really appropriate for the committee to, sort of have this impact on on private contractual relations, a transaction between a purchase and a buyer. It's really what in the old days was called a technical severance. I know that term, I don't think is used anymore. There's no such thing anymore, but that's what it was called at one time many years ago when you had these inadvertent mergers. It was called a technical severance, and that in essence is what this is. So again, I would submit respectfully that these conditions ought not to apply. There's no development being proposed.
Thank you. All right, so are there any more questions from the panel for Ms. King? No? And I've asked the public, are there any members of the public online that wish to address this application? We don't have anyone online. So Mr. Talarico, I'll give you the opportunity for the last word, sir.
Well, I think I would just say in summary again that I could understand if such conditions were being imposed if there was a proposed development. Here, there's no development being proposed. It's really a case of correcting an inadvertent merger of two properties that were historically separate and distinct. That's all this is for. And as a result of that, I would ask that the application be granted without conditions.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to ask the panel if they would like to reserve this application. All those in favor of reserve? Your application is going to be reserved, sir, and you'll hear our decision within 10 days or in 10 days.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I think that concludes our business for today. Thanks, everybody, for your help, and we'll see you in a few weeks.